York Times, Vanessa Friedman.
Hi. In the interest of full transparency, I would like to explain that I have not lost an earring. I had to remove it because of this exciting Madonna microphone. If you want to know, I think to start this, what I think is really going to be a fascinating panel, I'd like to actually ask everyone on stage to introduce themselves, because I think they will do a much more efficient and fully transparent way of that than I will. Francois.
Good morning. My name is Francois-Henry Bennahmias. I'm the CEO of Audemars Piguet. It's a watch company independently owned for 143 years. We manufacture 40,000 watches a year for the world.
Chip.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Chip Bergh. I'm the president and CEO of Levi Strauss. I've got you. We've been around for 165 years. we make a couple of 100 million pairs of jeans every year, and truly represent one of the most iconic brands in the world.
Neil.
I'm Neil Blumenthal. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Warby Parker. We've been around a few years.
How many? Come on. Specifics.
8, exactly 8. We just celebrated our birthday. But we design and sell prescription glasses and sunglasses for a fraction of what they'd usually cost. And then for every pair that we sell, we distribute one to someone in need.
Meridith.
Hi, I'm Meridith Valiando Rojas. I'm the co-founder and CEO of DigiTour Media. We are the largest producers of live events featuring social media stars. So our brand caters to Gen Z. We sell hundreds of thousands of tickets. And we are a consumer-facing brand that resonates with this audience. Some of our investors include Ryan Seacrest, Viacom, Condé Nast, and Gyosiri.
How long have you been around?
8 years.
Okay, this was not conscious. We didn't really mean to have age on this side and youth on this side, but it kind of fell out that way. In the interest of audience transparency, I wonder if everyone here who owns a pair of Levi's could raise their hand.
All right. Awesome.
What about an Audemars Piguet watch?
I'm out.
Oh, there are. Look.
Wait, 1 second. 1 second.
That's a pretty good market
Let me
share.
take a picture of everybody. Wait.
Picture.
Wait. Security?
All right. Neil, Warby Parker?
I'm wearing mine.
Nice. Great.
All right.
Thank you.
And has anyone been to a DigiFest? Okay, you guys, you are seriously missing something.
Our audience tends to be 14, so I don't feel too bad about that turn of hands.
I don't know. I went with my kids, and it was a revelation. Telling you, if you got a company, you should know this woman. All right, so I think to start, I would like to ask each of you on stage to define what, in corporate terms, transparency means to you, because I think there are a lot of different applications that could be, part of this word. It could do with supply chain. It could do with communications. It can do with internal communications. It can do with making mistakes and owning up to them. So, Francois, do you want to start?
Sure. Transparency. When we talk to the outside, there have been many issues with the Swiss-made name, because obviously today in Switzerland you can call a watch Swiss-made if it's 60% of it is actually done in Switzerland. So a lot of people are actually cheating the system and actually have a lot more outside, but then because it's brought and some specific parts on the watches are made in Switzerland, they can call the watch Swiss-made. So we have degrading actually the perception of what a true Swiss watch is, and at Audemars Piguet we fight a lot actually to get that level to a ratio of 90 or 95%. On the inside of the company, transparency has always been key for everybody, so we share our mistakes. We actually encourage people to be as transparent as possible. Failure works and happens. We've been in business for around 43 years. There were some years in the history of the company where we made only 2 watches in a year. So,
which years?
1934. 2 watches. And the very first time we made a watch in series was in 1951, where we made 7 times the same watch. That's inside trading information. It means that before 1951, every single one of our watches is unique, which has more value. That's a gift today. No, but...
So I've spent my entire adult life building brands, and I spent 28 years at P&G before joining Levi's about 7 years ago. And to me, transparency is absolutely essential if you're going to build a brand that resonates with consumers, because it's part of how you build trust. And so just about everything we do at Levi's, we try to be fully transparent. You can go to our website. We have all of our suppliers, all of our mills listed on our website. We are very transparent about our carbon footprint. We've done 2 life cycle analysis on a pair of jeans, and we know where water is consumed. We know our carbon footprint on our jeans. So we try to be transparent in just about everything we do. And I do think in today's world, we know that consumers trust brands a lot less today than they did even back as recently as the year 2000. It's about a 25-point drop in trust of brands. And particularly with the younger generations, they're attaching themselves and associating themselves with brands that they trust, with brands and companies that they trust. And one of the pathways to trust is through transparency.
But presumably consumers trust everything less.
They don't?
I mean,
yeah, everything less.
Isn't that the issue? Like there's a kind of larger climate of mistrust, and that puts the onus on brands in a different way. Because they're sort of, instead of starting from a position of like, okay, you're going to be, moral or reliable, essentially the starting point now is like, you're putting something over on me.
Absolutely, but the funny thing is that there's a dichotomy there where people more than ever trust that the product they're buying will actually do what it's supposed to, but they don't necessarily trust the company behind it, if that makes sense. So I grew up, we were a Tide household. We bought Tide because we thought it washed our clothes better. Everybody knows you buy any laundry detergent, it will wash your clothes, and it's going to wash it just as well. There's been a lot of research on this. That Young Mi Moon, who's a professor at HBS, has written a whole book of it called Different. But what's happened is a lot of these categories have gotten hyper-competitive, and there is a lot of, there's little differentiation on the product side, and how do you differentiate? It's often on these other attributes, one of which can be transparency. And I think one of the things that we're seeing is that transparency is being often forced upon companies. I'd like to think that it's not being forced upon us because we built our brand in a transparent way, but there are these 2 macro factors. One is that we're in the age of the internet where all information is available to everyone every second of the day. So if you're not transparent, you're going to easily be found out. And the second thing is that we're in the tightest labor market that I've ever lived through. And if you want to attract the best and the brightest, you have to be transparent to your employees. So to your question on how we define transparency, it's explaining what we do, how and why to our stakeholders, our customers, our employees, the community at large, and our shareholders.
Explaining it by what? Posting something online?
Through any number of mediums. It could even be on this trip. So I'm based in New York. I was just in San Francisco. I flew down this morning and ran to visit one of our stores, and even posting on Instagram stories what I'm doing so the team can see it. I know that sounds a little frivolous, but those moments give a peek into, hey, what is our founder doing? What's our CEO doing? We now have 1,500 people, and we still do a full team stand-up every week, and we record that, and we enable anybody on the team to watch that. It's about 30 minutes. My co-founder and co-CEO Dave and I get up and we explain what's going on in the business, what are new things we're doing, and why we're doing them.
presumably you don't post that to the general public.
We don't. So, and also we're a private company, so
It's not transparent.
That's true. And we've raised now about $300 million, but we don't post our financials. So I think there are degrees to which people are sharing.
Right, Meridith, I mean, I think you can speak for, this Gen Z, which is sort of the holy grail of the next consumer, right? I mean, why is transparency so important to them?
So on this point, I think I could speak to just briefly how my own brand has been built through transparency, but also through how we serve as a conduit for this audience and for brands and have that be successful, because we've seen it go really wrong and we've seen it really be effective. And at the core of it is being honest and authentic, and it goes back to transparency and not sort of pretending that you really like something in your YouTube video if in fact you're just getting paid for it. So I'll take a step back. So as far as my own business, we're a live events company where we put on these shows for teen girls. Lots of them. They're screaming, they're crying, they're losing their minds.
How many?
At any given time, our small ones are a few thousand and our large ones are about 20,000.
So you reach how many kids a year, about?
About 250,000, but that's just in the room. As far as how we force multiply it with our own social platform and the talent we work with, it's about 350 million. So we put together campaigns to talk to, a very hard to reach demographic of teenagers through leveraging our relationships with these social media stars. And what's interesting is we've seen what I call the cut and paste campaign, where, they get the copy from the brand to post, and they cut and paste it and put it in their Instagram, or they put it wherever they're posting, and the audience will call them out on it, and they'll be like, this is horrible, like how could you possibly do this? Like there's none of you in this post, you're just selling out, you're just taking money. On the other hand, I've seen campaigns where a brand has given a cool experience to an influencer, and the influencer comes out and says, this video is that much cooler for you guys because Sephora paid for it, or because this brand had partnered with me on it, or I'm going to Coachella and I'm capturing all this cool content for you guys and going to these amazing parties thanks to this brand. So if you can let your audience in on the process versus trying to hide it, because this Gen Z, they're like the best detectives in the world. They will find out in 2 seconds, like if you're telling them something that's not true, and then they'll unfollow you, and then that relationship is over.
I mean, talking about, someone calling you out or finding out about something, it often seems to me that one of the best ways to sucker someone into trusting you is to start by admitting a mistake. That if you're willing to say what you did wrong to somebody, that makes them more likely to believe you when you say something you did right. So, I mean, have all of you said publicly things you've done wrong? Was it hard to say that, or was it easy?
No, it's actually, we've done it several times, and we do this not every day, but almost every day, because we do make mistakes, and that's okay. At the end, what matters is, when I go back to the young generation, I was with my daughter this morning, we live in California. She's 22 years old. And I said, you've been lied to so many times every day because of the way the world is going. You've got banks, governments, sports, everything, where they are supposed to lead by examples. And you find out scandals left and right, Volkswagen, to name them, and everything that happens. So because of that, we have to be extremely careful, because even at a level like Audemars Piguet now, and we don't sell to 14 years old, except I've got one kid who came with his dad last year who was 11 years old, and his dad offered him a watch. I say, what are you going to get when you're 18? But that's the true exception. The thing is, they are asking us more and more if what we do, what we say, what we communicate is real. They are asking us to open the curtains and say, stop telling me this, show me exactly. And they're going to be very tough to us if we don't open the curtains and say, this I cannot show you, actually, it's impossible. We have to open the curtains. which is good because at the end we can tell beautiful stories, and there are many more years to go this way.
So, I mean, tell me what that means, opening the curtains to you. Do you let cameras into the workshops? Do you let them into the boardroom? What does it mean?
More and more. Recently, we did something where we took the kids of our employees, so 7 years old to 13 years old, and we say you got to spend 2 days with your parents left and right, and you have to tell us how you want to work for Audemars Piguet 20 years from now, or 15 years from now. And they rewrote the entire Audemars Piguet book. And there were very funny things to learn, actually, from that. So yes, we do open because we want to learn. 2 things came out of this. One, we will never have this younger generation work for 8 hours a day. They want to have fun every maybe 2 hours. They have to stop and play. For real, they have to stop and play. And the good thing is, because we are building a brand new facility, because to go from 40,000 watches to 45, we have to build a lot of square footage and train a lot of new watchmakers. They say, why don't, instead of having the cafeteria for the entire company, why don't you grow your own food for everybody and make the employee work after hours, actually, to even gather together to work as a community of the watchmakers and do this for the entire company. We looked at it, and these are 2 decisions that actually we are making: fun and food.
So you've got a garden?
Sorry?
You're having a garden? A farm?
We will put one, absolutely. We will.
You're going to teach everyone how to dig?
We got to bring people that really teach us to be able to, for us to do it ourselves. Yes.
Okay. Chip, have you ever made a mistake that you've talked about publicly?
Well, there was a key word used earlier about authenticity. And I think if you're really, and Levi's, actually what the brand stands for is expressing your authentic self-expression. And the brand is now definitely having a moment, in part because that is really what the brand stands for. But if you're really going to be authentic, you have to be willing to kind of walk on both sides, not just tell all the good stuff, but also be transparent with the things that you're doing about some of the bad stuff. And one example that came to mind as soon as you asked the question, this goes back about 5 years ago. I think I'd been in the job about a year and a half. And many of you will know of Greenpeace, and you will know of Greenpeace's efforts against the apparel industry. And there are issues in the apparel industry. You know, a lot of chemicals are used. We're very transparent about our chemical list already. We publish the chemicals that we use in our supply chain. But they were after the apparel industry for a chemical called potassium permanganate, and we wound up meeting with them, which a lot of companies won't even sit down and talk with Greenpeace, and we worked out a plan with them on how we would eliminate potassium permanganate from our supply chain by 2020, and we're actually going to complete it early, but we had no idea when we agreed to it how we were going to get it done. But we did agree that we would lead in this area. The other thing that we've done, both on the chemicals front as well as how to remove water from the processing of jeans, is we've open sourced everything that we've learned. We share it with our competitors. So if we're making progress on something that's important to the industry, we're not at all afraid to lead and let others follow us. And we actually think that that's a responsibility of the leader to take bold steps forward, even when we don't know how the hell we're going to complete it, and then once we figure it out, share how we've done it with our competitors and the rest of the industry.
In the vein of Greenpeace, was that an easy decision to make? Was it hard to convince your colleagues that you should sit down with them or your board? I mean, that they haven't, as you said, been the most popular.
So I had been in the job literally, I think, probably about a year, and they marched on the hard park in front of our office building. Surprise, surprise, on the day of a board meeting. And it was in December, and the board dinner that night was actually at my house. And we decided that morning to sit down. I told the board that's what we were going to do. I didn't ask for permission. I said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to sit down, and we're going to see if we can resolve this with Greenpeace peacefully. The good news, I mean, if you fast forward 5 years, we have an amazing relationship with them today, because we did proactively work with them to solve a really, really thorny issue for the industry, as you know. And
but was the board happy when you told them that? Or were they like, oh my God,
well,
how did we let this
through
guy
dinner
take
at
this
my
job?
house, I'm texting back and forth with the woman on our team who was, sitting down with Greenpeace to try to get to a resolution that everybody felt good about. And the board, you stiff arm and we would have had them marching on our hard park for a long time to come. So, it's one of the things when you're the leader in the industry, you get picked on. You become the lightning rod, and whether it's an NGO or a consumer group or something, and it reinforces the importance of really being transparent.
Neil, for a relatively young company, mistakes often do get made. Did you talk about that in the in your journey to now?
We do, but we also try and make mistakes that are not catastrophic. So if you're talking publicly about what you're doing and what you're experimenting and testing with, when you do make a mistake, it doesn't seem that big. To Chip's point of how do you build trust, it's through transparency, it's through vulnerability. So when we launched in 2010, we were really fortunate. We were featured in Vogue and GQ. The company took off like a rocket ship. We had this home try-on program where you select 5 frames, we ship it to you free of cost, and you have 5 days to try it on at home. We had to suspend that program within 48 hours because we ran out of inventory, and people are sending us emails, angry and complaining, and of course we would just immediately explain, hey, we just started the business, we didn't foresee this level of demand, and I know that doesn't seem like a really major problem. It's a high-class problem, a champagne problem, but one where we could have turned off our very first customers, but then by engaging with them and responding to every single email, we would be up all night because it was just the 4 of us founders and some early employees. We built a lot of rapport. And then something else happened. People started asking if they could come into our office. Because at the time, we were full-time MBA students at Wharton, and we were basically working out of my apartment in Philly. We said, oh, well, we don't have an office, but you can come to...
come to our dorm room?
Yeah, literally. You could come to my apartment. And we invited 5 customers to come under the thought process that, if this is an awful experience, we just tarnish our reputation with 5 people. And we literally let them into my apartment. We put the glasses on the dining room table. We had 4 employees sitting on my couch, typing furiously on their laptops, processing orders, responding to customer emails, and we let them peek behind the curtain, and we displayed a level of vulnerability that is not that common. And those people ended up being great advocates for us because they felt connected to the brand. It's rare that you get a chance to see a company in a startup phase like this. I remember one was a resident. He came in his scrubs, and literally the next day we had like 20 more orders from the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. But more importantly, we got learnings from this, and we ended up setting up a store in our first office, which was, we moved back to New York, so it was on Union Square, where there was public transportation with big, bright, southern-facing windows, so we deliberately chose a location for our office so that way we could have a store so that every day our employees could see customers and be reminded who they're working for, and the customers could see who are the people that are working for them every day.
It's kind of like a chef's table. Right?
Exactly.
Into the kitchen. But it's one thing to do that when you are a startup. It is super charming to get to go into someone's dorm room and be like, woohoo, I'm part of the story. It's another thing when you're more successful, when you have, X thousands of employees. So, I did some research on you guys. And, certainly there have been NGOs, other groups that have accused you of being less transparent than you maybe purport to be, certainly in terms of supply chain. What do you say to that?
To be honest, I don't know if I've seen that. We now have our own facility in Rockland County, about an hour outside of the city, where we cut the lenses, insert them into the frames. Our frames are produced in China, Japan, and Italy, and we've always been very upfront about that. We don't have the reporting capability yet of Levi's and others, but that's what we strive to, and we're working on some GRI reporting. And I think transparency doesn't necessarily mean that you tell somebody every single detail about everything that you're doing, right? Like, again, we don't publish our financials, but I'm happy to explain why we don't, and where we are. Like at this moment, I'm not going to publish our frame factories because we're going up against some really large incumbents. In fact, the two biggest companies in the optical industry, Luxottica, which basically dominates frames, has about a $25 billion market cap, and Essilor, which dominates lenses, another $25 billion market cap company, are merging. And the last thing I want to do is tell anybody that could potentially mess with my supply chain what factories we're using and love the most. But you know, I can promise to our customers that we work with certain auditing firms like Verite, who's a Skoll, was started by a Skoll social enterprise fellow that goes in and does labor audits and health and safety audits, so that way we can at least promise that these factories are treating their employees well.
Meridith, do you think that, will that suffice? Because, I mean, it's a kind of scary, slippery slope, actually, when you start doing this, because the more you show, the more kind of assumption, I think, and demand there is that you then get to see more. You know, that if you do pull the curtain back, the curtain is all the way back, but it's not actually all the way back. It can't be. So how do you think that's received?
Well, I mean, I think that it's just the way that you responded, where you're happy to explain why you're not going to share things. I think my understanding of this audience and the millennial audience, which is your audience, that substitutes and that's acceptable. Because if you can't share something but you can give a good reason why not, then at least you're not avoiding it. I think it's when people avoid the communication that people get kind of weirded out and they want to know what you're hiding. But if you can provide an answer, even if it's at a high level and it's genuine and you're saying, I care that you want to know this information, but this is why I can't tell you it. In some ways that works. And in my own experience in sort of having to publicly apologize on a mass level,
when did you publicly apologize on a mass level?
Well, the most successful festival that we had, which I think you attended with your daughter, one of them, the sold-out one at Citi Field in New York, was 20,000 people, and the next day we had one in Boston. And it didn't go very well because the equipment didn't make it to Boston. Oh. We were too ambitious, and we were planning to have a smaller version of our New York festival in Boston the next day, and our crew didn't have enough time to rest. Like, these are the things you learn. It's baptism by fire. Like, you do it once and you'll never ever do it again because it was just so horrifying. But I was actually on a flight when I found out that the equipment wasn't arriving in Boston, and that we have two customers. We have the 14-year-olds and the 15-year-olds, but we have their moms and dads too. And if the 14-year-old starts to cry, if you're a parent, I'm sure some of you are, most of you are, and your teen or tween is crying and they're so upset, like, you're devastated, you're gonna go and yell at whoever's responsible for making them upset. So we were challenged because our audience knows they can reach us directly through social. And not only us as a company and us personally as the people running it, but then every artist that we have on the tour. So we break the internet every time we make the customer happy, or every time, which hopefully doesn't happen very often, but in this one instance, we very honestly had a disaster on our hands, and the equipment wasn't there, and our crew didn't arrive on time, and the meet and greet got pushed back. And so I'm getting on Wi-Fi, talking from the sky to my partner who's on the ground, and he's like, they're gonna arrest me for inciting a riot. Like, these parents are going crazy. I don't know what to do. The talent, they're starting to get nervous because their fans are very upset. And so we're just problem solving on the spot. And the following day, I put together an open letter from the CEO that I wrote, and it was very heartfelt about what went wrong, you know, and just really sort of taking full responsibility for what we thought we could achieve that didn't end up going so well, and, you know, that I not only was going to refund all of these people who had a bad experience, but that, you know, we were going to take extra lengths to make it right. And there was one parent in particular who was extremely vocal. I think she still talks to some of my team members today because she got their cell phone number on site, and she just still likes to talk to them. But we turned her around because we really listened to her, and we made her like the head of our sort of parent street team. We're like, all right, tell us everything that you didn't like, because she was the most vocal about being so upset about the experience, and how can we improve, because we care. And that, just being very honest and really caring and having good communication, I think that combination made the difference and allowed us to rebound versus, you know, putting our head in the sand and saying, don't yell at me, because, you know, we could have easily done that. But I mean, everyone was vocalizing their opinions, and we just had to deal with it head on.
This point about the role of the CEO, though, I think is so important. I mean, you can find my email address. I'm on the internet. Neil's email address is on. We're all on the internet, and you know, we operate.
Are you on the internet?
Probably. Is my email address? Very simple. Francois@AudemarsPiguet.com.
They'll find it. They'll find it. But we operate almost 3,000 stores around the world, and we're touching consumers every single day. And consumers sometimes have a problem, either in the store or when they get their product home, or sometimes 3 years later with the product. They write me.
And you answer all those letters?
I answer every single email I get from a consumer. Now, I also pass them on to some folks to follow up, but I answer every single email from a consumer, because at the end of the day, you know, it's a lot easier to keep a consumer who's got some level of dissatisfaction by solving that problem than to try to get a new consumer to replace the consumer that you've lost because of a bad experience. And at the end of the day, it also has an impact on the brand and what the brand really stands for. So I do think, you know, whether it's responding to an email and taking head on, you know, a problem that happened, or taking important stands on issues that, you know, kind of cut across or against the values of the company, and not being afraid to be public about it. In today's world, that is a big part of the job of a CEO, I think.
Francois, do you agree?
0%. I answer all my emails as well. 200 million pairs of jeans, 40,000 watches, a lot easier, I will give you that. But
watches are a little bit more expensive than the pair.
Slightly more. So when they go crazy, sure, they go completely crazy.
What do they go crazy about? What have you heard?
It could be anything. It could be they come for repair, or they drop their watches, and the watches was promised to come back in 6 weeks, and it comes back in 8 or 10. Or they haven't heard from the salesperson in the store, or the day showed up, they were not actually dealt with the right way, and they write letters and letters and letters and emails for everything, sure. And I really make a point of knowing exactly what's going on, answering every email, and sometimes even picking up the phone, wherever the people are, because I want to understand exactly. And when you treat those problems like this, when it means you care, and you can fix issues a lot faster.
Someone told me once that Richard Branson used to do that. He used to go work in the call center for Virgin, you know, once a month for half a day or something.
Yeah, I don't know a CEO that doesn't do that, frankly. Right? It's number one, yeah, you're doing to get some customer feedback, but at the end of the day, you're actually getting way more customer feedback in the data and reporting that you receive. It's really about, you know, being a motivating, inspirational leader to your team, and being in the trenches with them.
I think it's interesting that we talk a lot about we've talked about the curtain, because I mean, certainly when it comes to luxury, probably even more than, you know, than jeans or than glasses, you know, like the mystery, you know, the dream was classically, you know, the goal of a company, that you create this kind of perfect aspirational product, and the, you know, and how it's made was hidden. You know, when did that change, and why?
Change because it's one thing to say we are the master watchmakers since 1875. Okay, that was one of our headlines, taglines 15 years ago, and to actually show it. And people love stories. I'm going to give you a quick one, a simple one. In this watch right here, it's called a perpetual calendar. I'm going to make it as simple as possible. There are 400 parts in that mechanism, and it's completely mechanic. There are 5 parts. There is a family of bears in that mechanism. I've got Papa Bear, Mama Bear, and 3 kids, baby bears. Every 4 years, the family bear wakes up the night of the 20th of February to make one wheel move from the 20th of February to March to the February 29th as a leap year, instead of jumping to March 1st. When this is done at that night, this family of 5 bears say, I'm tired, I'm going to go back for 4 more years. Okay? That's a pure mechanical thing that was invented over 150 years ago with people with no computers, nothing. When you tell those stories, people love to hear that and they relate. If I say we're the master watchmakers, oh, by the way, the complication is all the parts are angled like this and done this way, I'm losing everybody. So recently, transparency, I asked my entire retail team to find me 15 stories where we could tell that actually like everybody would be 5 years old.
But why didn't you do it before? I mean, why did it take till recently? Why isn't this something that's been going on for,
because
decades?
we are pushed to it. We are really pushed to it. I'm going to give you another example which is not related to us. I was with the CEO of Harrods recently. And he told me that for the first time in the history of Harrods, in terms of makeup, one brand, which I'm not going to mention, took over from the major ones. What I call the Christian Dior, the Saint Laurent, and everybody. And for one reason. One brand, one famous brand was launching at that time their 17th red for lipstick. Okay, it's a red ballerina, a 17th red. That brand that took over from them, a lot younger as a brand, shot a video of a kid, 17 years old, full of acne, a boy, made it up as a woman, gorgeous, and they were showing the video. And for kids, actually, they could, in 2 seconds, say, if that brand can do that to that face, I want it. I don't want the 17th red. So they want more and more stories every day to say, to explain what we do in the simplest way.
I think it's interesting that you guys all either started your companies or got your jobs at pretty much the same time period. I mean, you were 2013, 2012, you became CEO, 2011. 2010, 2010. So, like, was it something in the water, or was there something bigger going on?
They are our kids, actually.
That taught you.
Him and I are actually married. This is our kid.
I mean, so for Levi's, I mean, I think this company has been doing it for a long, long time, well before me. And it gets back to the values of the company and what Levi Strauss, the man, the myth, the legend himself, started 165 years ago.
Yeah, but you took it to a new level.
Yeah, and in part, I saw that as a critical step in rebuilding the brand, that the importance of authenticity, the importance of transparency, everything that we've been talking about here, internally, externally, with the consumer, is just absolutely critical in establishing, or reestablishing in our case, the power of the Levi's brand.
But this was all post-recession. So I guess my question really is, like, had something changed in culture, in society, and consumer expectations after that event that produced, for people for whom this value or this, this approach to business actually was really crucial?
There's no question that, us sort of describing the optical industry and being able to say, hey, we're going to provide the beautiful design, same premium materials and production processes, but for a fourth of the price, post-recession. That absolutely resonated. Again, what are some other macro things that were happening? I'll give credit to the Osbournes, Ozzy Osbourne, this rock star, you start to realize, oh, he lives in a suburban house just like the rest of America, and has an island in his kitchen, and he engages with his kids like every other father in the country. So you had some stuff going on culturally, literally with reality TV that was peeling back the curtain. You'd have this second .com the sort of explosion of startups, but really the internet getting into everybody's pockets with the rise of social media. And right, we've seen it in fashion where on Instagram, if you post an image that is basically has gone into post-production, it doesn't get any likes, right? Because it's seen as inauthentic. So the idea that these glossy advertisements paint this picture, sometimes people don't think that that's realistic anymore, and they want to see the kid with the acne because that is a lot more relatable today.
I also think I mean, everything's being disrupted. And the last business I ran at P&G was the Gillette shaving business. And about a year after I left, along came the Dollar Shave Club and Harry's, a business that Neil knows a little about. It completely disrupted, you know, a brand that had at that time a 72% market share in the United States. So disruption's happening everywhere. And if you want to be a successful brand or a successful company, it's all about being in touch with the consumer and being honest and authentic with the consumer about everything that you're doing. And if you don't disrupt yourself in how you're communicating and becoming, really not even communicating, becoming a part of the consumer's life, somebody else is going to do it.
Have you disrupted yourself, Francois?
We are actually, because we look at, obviously, the new generation, and we've seen over the last 6 years a much younger audience coming to the brand. When I say young, I say 18 to 25, because hip-hop culture is becoming bigger and bigger by the day, and we've been mentioned a zillion times. I don't know why, but it started a long time ago when I made a deal with Jay-Z that used to have Audemars Piguet watches and was talking about them in his songs, and then it opened so many more. But today, most of other jewelry stores in Europe, for example, you have to go through a man's strap. You press a button, there is one door, you go inside, you have to wait for the door to close, you open the second one. The young generation will never do that. So what we do today is we think about what could be retail tomorrow, because obviously, with the high value of our items, we have to be careful. Insurances will not insure us if anybody can go. And you have a lot of security issues. But we've opened recently what we call Audemars Piguet houses, where basically you come, it's like our founders, Jules Audemars and Edouard Piguet, being 25 years old today, will have apartments across the globe. We've opened New York, Hong Kong, Milano, Madrid, and Munich. People come. It's not a jewelry store anymore. It's a place where you can watch a soccer game or a football game or golf or whatever you want. You can do a baby shower if you are with your friends. And it's a lot more welcoming. I don't believe that the way we looked at retail for the last 50 years will remain. We're going to see so much more disruption, including on the high end. When you see what certain brands are doing in terms of evolution of commercializing their items, it's mind-boggling. Really, we know that we don't know, actually. It's going to evolve so fast, and we have to listen to what they're telling us, because the young generation will be actually the one telling us what they want, and we'll have to adapt.
All right, I have one more question, then we're going to open this up to the floor so you guys can ask your questions. And I will just warn you, I grew up in a family that believed very much in the Socratic method. So if you don't ask a question, I will call on you. All right, so my last question is this. You know, transparency, we've talked a lot about in terms of supply chain and communications, but what about politics? Because, you know, traditionally, particularly in the fashion and consumer space, brands were not particularly public about their political positions for understandable reasons, right? You risk pissing off half your consumer base if they don't agree with your stands. However, I mean, you've taken a political position. Audemars Piguet has, you know, supported certainly, you know, environmentalism. Mm-hmm. You know, Warby Parker believes in helping people. So, you know, how do you balance that decision, and what went into, you know, a willingness or a belief, in fact, that you had to stand up for what you believe in?
Yeah, so right, we're seeing CEOs and executive teams be a lot more vocal than ever before, and frankly, I don't think that it's that courageous. I think that we're in a moment, again, because of transparency, right? People are making decisions on what brands they buy, not just on product attributes, but on all these other attributes. How a brand treats its employees, but not just how it treats its employees, how it thinks and what it believes. And similarly, employees expect now, especially millennials, they expect that the place where they work is going to stand up and be authentic. If they're espousing certain values, then you have to speak up at times. The way that we often describe to our team what issues we're going to engage on is, does it align with our values, and is it something that we can have an impact on? Because we don't want to spread ourselves too thin. We've always taken a social enterprise approach to be sort of practical and take action. So we've been very vocal around immigration issues and DACA, signing up and working with a bunch of state AGs and filing amicus briefs. We've been very involved with LGBTQ rights, and we now have a second office in Nashville. So we've tried to use where we have political power to ensure that our values are being lived publicly.
And you haven't had any blowback from anyone for any stance you've taken?
We have, but at the end of the day, I think there's more to lose when you don't stand up for what you believe than if you get hit for standing up for what you believe.
Mm-hmm. Same?
Yeah, I mean, actually, the same list of concerns, too. Levi Strauss was founded by an immigrant, and I think it's such an important part of the social fabric and the history of what this country is all about. So I was very public on the immigration ban. Our foundation, in early February last year, funded an incremental $1 million just in the Bay Area to help with nonprofit organizations that were protecting vulnerable people. At that point in time, we've stood up, very, very strongly for DACA, amicus briefs for LGBTQ. It all gets back to the values of the company and what the company fundamentally believes in, and we are very strong believers in basic human rights. And I'm not afraid to stand up for these things because I do believe it's a responsibility of the CEO today, and as Neil said, almost an expectation that you're not going to be afraid to take a stand on important moral or social issues of our day. This company and this brand, in fact, flying down this morning from San Francisco, I read in the newspaper that the Boy Scouts is being renamed to the Scouts.
Because they want the girls.
That's right. Well, and this company, back in the early 90s, took a very strong stand when the Boy Scouts banned gay scout leaders and took a huge hit at that point in time. But now you look back on it 30 years later and you go, but we were the first. And we're not afraid to be the first. We're not afraid to stick our necks out on important social issues of our day. And people will look back 30 years from now and say, that was a no-brainer. Why didn't more companies do it?
But you have to have a long-term view.
You have to. And you have to be willing to take a short-term hit if that's what it comes down to.
Francois, I mean, Patagonia is currently one of the companies suing the Trump administration over their changes to the national monuments. Can you ever imagine doing something like that?
No.
Why not?
No, because on the standpoint of Jasmine Audemars, so the chairwoman of the board, makes it very, very important for the company to remain discreet about what we do. And we don't want any political attachment, so environment is somehow political. But she made a very serious point of saying, whatever we spend, it could be millions, but we don't ever talk about it. And we came several times to her saying, we don't want to advertise it, it's not a marketing tool, but we should say a few things. She said, no. When she came, she was an editor-in-chief. She was the first woman editor-in-chief of a newspaper in Switzerland. And her dad at one point said, "You're next." She said, "I'm not." Said, "No, you're next." So, "Okay, give me a year." And when she came back in 1992, I said, "Okay, I'm going to take over the job under one condition. One, I want to start a foundation for environment." So when nobody was ever mentioning the word green, she had that vision because of where we are from, that protection of environment was important. But she also made a point saying, and we'll never talk about it. And every time there is something where there could be a political angle, because of everybody we work with, we're in 74 countries, she said, we don't. We're staying really under the radar.
And you don't feel that that's a mistake for the reasons that Chip is saying, that your consumers are actually expecting you to take a stand?
Not really. I have to be honest, not really. We rarely have those type of discussions. We'll have those discussions when we have dinners. We'll talk about many, many things, and we have different profiles. Not the same political ideas all the time, but publicly, it doesn't go.
Meridith, do you think that's right or wrong?
I mean, I think it's okay. I mean, I think it's interesting because I think some brands, saying nothing is okay sometimes, especially depending on who your customers are. I don't, like, to your earlier point, I don't think there's a lot of 14-year-olds buying your product, right? So I think this younger generation does want to see a brand represent some values that they share in common, and that they look for that when they're looking to purchase. But then, there are brands who kind of stay neutral and they stay corporate, and that's okay. They might not pull on the heartstrings of some of these kids, but it doesn't matter if that's not your customer.
So you don't think that there is going to be an increasing imperative when we look forward to stand up publicly for a belief system if you are a brand, in order to keep your consumers?
Well, yes, but I also think it's a rabbit hole, right? So there are so many things that need to be, so many points of view that can be shared on every single thing that's happening in the world. And I think you have to pick your battles. And I think you have to your earlier point, figure out what aligns with your brand. And then, you don't want to just be somebody that's chiming in for the sake of chiming in every single time that there's, it can become something where that's your full-time job, where you're just sort of sharing, and then the personality of the brand becomes the personality of the person running it. And sometimes that's okay, but I also think that could be polarizing for your customer base. So you want to figure out, okay, the brand, not me as the CEO and founder, but the brand represents this and this and this. And yes, in many instances, it's the same thing because it's a brand that I created. But in some instances, it doesn't, and I want it to stand on its own, and we want to be selective with what we kind of come forward and talk about, and not necessarily be polarizing because we're so hardcore on every single issue that's in the news every single day.
Okay, questions from the audience. We have one over here first.
Hello, my name is Aubrey. I'm the founder of something called the Africa Expert Network. My question is for Neil. Many of you are representing brands for the 1% or less than 1%, but you started in emerging markets and have had experience in African markets. So how did working with the 99.999% of the world in emerging markets inform what you do today? And will you guys be investing in the next 80% of growth coming out of emerging markets by supporting emerging market entrepreneurs?
Thank you for your question. So before going to business school, I ran a nonprofit social enterprise called Vision Spring that trained low-income women in the developing world to start their own businesses, giving vision screenings and selling glasses in their communities to people living on less than $4 a day. And that experience has sort of made me into the entrepreneur and the executive that I am today. Right, working in those markets are a bazillion times more challenging than working here in the U.S. We were trying to introduce glasses as a product in communities where nobody was wearing glasses, and the question was well, how should we do that? At first, we thought, okay, well, just go out. We'll tell everyone, right, this is good for your health. You'll be able to see. You'll be able to do better at school. You'll be able to work and make more money. And then we started thinking, well, how else do you introduce a product? Oh, who are the influencers in these communities? Oh, it's the Sarpunch or the village leader. It's the pastor in a certain community. And we'd actually gift them a pair of glasses so they'd start wearing it, and then people would associate glasses with stature and hopefully create some social status around it. We would work through different pricing models. We found about 1/10 of someone's monthly income was something that somebody would be willing to spend. We were running into credibility issues with some of these entrepreneurs that we were training, because their neighbors would say, hey, I've grown up with you. How do you know how to give a vision test? You didn't move to the capital and go to school for several years. So we started creating certificates and identification cards and lab coats to create credibility. One of the things we also ended up doing was putting up a banner that we called them Vision Entrepreneurs. I would say Vision Entrepreneurs in Training, and we'd leave that banner up for 6 months, even though it only took a week or so to train some of these entrepreneurs. So it was, all of those lessons I took with me, and even learning to design glasses, because right, vanity is not monopolized by the rich, and you could be living on less than $2 a day in rural Bangladesh, and you care just as much about what your neighbors and friends think of you as somebody that lives on Fifth Avenue. So those lessons I take with me every day. We are now the largest donor to Vision Spring, which we take a lot of pride in. As we think about production and supporting other entrepreneurs, we are primarily focused on getting glasses on the face of the people that need them, but we're always thinking about how can we sort of do more.
Okay, another question?
It's been really great hearing everyone here talk about how it's, in the last 6-7 years, become good business sense to pursue transparency and be truly honest and authentic as a brand. Also hearing you say that it's good business sense to be responsible and take a social stand on things that matter is great to hear. Do any of you guys have a view on whether the next decade is going to be good business sense to become a B Corp and to really be a business with purpose and take responsibility for all the externalities that your business may create?
But you are a B Corp, right?
So yeah, we believe that that's the case, and one of our investors is Bailey Gifford, and they have a bunch of different funding sources, including Scottish Mortgage and a bunch of pension funds, and one of their due diligence process was primarily focused on company culture, because they believed that led to long-termism and long-term success. If you have a deeply rooted value system, and that's ingrained in every aspect of the business, I think if you look, and there's going to be, thankfully over the next 5 to 10 years, hopefully a lot more examples of companies that consider all of their stakeholders, their employees, the customers, the environment, their community at large, are the ones that are going to have more success over the long run. Hopefully the cost of capital will decrease, and we'll see more people adopting the legal structure of a public benefit corporation. We'll see more assessment and certifications. I think that's also really critical. Yes, there's some GRI reporting that's now really being done across the board, but better assessments so that way people can really understand who's greenwashing, who's not, but not just in a binary sense, but in a much more, I'd say, rigorous and detailed manner on where somebody sits within the spectrum.
Okay, I'm just going to stop you for 1 second, because our session is over, and I want to hear if either of you think there's going to be more B Corps in the future. I assume you are not intending to become one.
No, but we're going to act like one in a sense that I've never heard anybody from our board, which are the families, obviously, asking me as a CEO, you have to grow the business by 10 to 15 or 20% a year. They are asking me every year to make sure the company is going to be there for its employees, its people, for the next 100 or 200 years. So that's a motto that we live by and we live with every day, and that's how we built the future of the company. It's not only about making money. We could have done so much more over the last 10 years to increase revenue, increase quantities and everything. The goal was protect the integrity of the people, not only that work for Audemars Piguet, but that work in the Vallée de Joux where we are from.
Chip.
Just real quickly, I guess the short answer is probably yes. We've looked at it, the reporting and extra administration required. I think we meet all the standards right now. We just haven't gone through it because of the administration and the paperwork.
Blame Trump.
Well, but I think those standards are the standards that all businesses are going to be held to over time. And if we can simplify the way companies get it, then maybe more companies will be going through the process.
All right,
Kudos to you.
I think that's a good place to end this. I know there are more questions, so I encourage you to doorstop these guys when you see them in the hall. Thank you very much.
Thank you.